Hi, my name is Medhat Elmasry, and I'm going to give you a lesson today on Express. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to see how we can build an application that doesn't use Express. So I'm going to go into a folder where I'm going to build my app. So I'll build my app in this folder here. And let me call it No Express. So in this particular case, we're not using Express. I'm going to go into a command prompt here. And I'll open this folder in Visual Studio Code, like that. Now, in here, I'm going to create a file called app.js. And in my app.js, I'm going to create a web application that does not use Express. And we'll see that it's a little bit tedious. We're going to require the HTTP library, and we want to use port 3000. So I'm going to make the port a variable here. Now I'm going to define my server. And this has a callback. One way of defining a callback is using the arrow syntax. We can do this. And in here, I'm going to display something to the console. I can actually display the URL in a log by getting the URL property from the request object. And I'm going to send out some HTML now. And let me display the actual URL of the request. Close the body tag and then the HTML tag. And that's what I want to send out. As far as the server is concerned, I need to get it to listen on a specific port number. So I would say server.listen on this port number, the variable port. Comma. And we can have an anonymous function being called here. So let me log something to the console. Okay, so this should start for us the web app. Let's go into command prompt and start the server. See, we do have a command prompt right here. So I'm going to say node app.js. It should start the server. I have a typo, so I'll fix that, save it, and run again. So now my application is listening on port 3000. Let me see what appears in the browser. You can see that it just responds with the URL. Now this is a little bit tedious. We want to use the Express library or the framework to do something similar, but we don't really want to go through the nitty-gritty of the low-level code here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop the server and I'm going to install Express locally inside of this project. Let us start by initializing a project or creating a project.json file. So that you do by going npm init. It's going to ask you for the name of the package. This is fine. The version is fine. No description. Entry point is app.js. It just found that. Test command, nothing. Git repository, nothing. Keywords, I'm just going to take the defaults and say yes at the very end. Now that we have a project.json file, I want to install Express locally. So that's done by going npm install express -- save. So it's going to save it in this project. Now that I have Express, I'll use it in my code. So in my code here, I need to import Express. I'm going to go var express equals to require Express. And I'm going to get an instance of the Express application by going var app equals to Express. So now I have an instance of that object. I'm going to comment out this because there's an alternative way of creating the server object. I'm going to create the server object using this app object. So here I'm going to say app.get, and we're going to say when the user goes to the root, we're going to call a callback function. So I can do the arrow syntax here, and in here we'll have also a request object and a response object. And in here I can say response.send. I can pretty much copy this code here, but instead of saying response.write, I can say response.send. I'll send out this HTML, and the way I'll create a server object is by going var server, and I'll have the HTTP object create for me a server using my instance of Express. So let's see if this is going to work. So if I restart my application, go node app.js, it should start. And if I go into my page, it pretty much does the same thing. Let me do a small change here. Instead of responding with the URL, let me just say Express. Save this so we can see something. Restart the server, and now if I refresh, we should see Express. So that seems to be working. Our Express is working. Let us send out some JSON object. In other words, let's produce some APIs, and I'll just show you how easy it is to produce some APIs. So let's add another route. So each one of these is a route. So the only route that we have so far is the route that goes to the root. Let me create another route. And I'm going to create another route, give it API/say users. This is another route that if you want to arrive or you want to get to this route, you have to go /API/users. And here again, we're going to have a callback function. And in this callback function, I'm going to specify the content type. So in here, I'm going to set the header for the output to be application slash JSON. So I'll say content type is going to be and now I'll send some JSON data. I'll create a JSON object right here, and I'll say, for example, the name is, and let me say, comma, is developer is true. And maybe add something else. Let us say role admin. Let's see if that works. Stop the server, start it again, and now if I go /API/users, cannot get, I think I made a mistake here, should say API. So there we go. It found that particular JSON object. Now, there are scaffolders that can give you a baseline of a complete app that you can start with. It gives you like the zero state of an application with all the various views and the template that you can use to proceed with a more serious application. So if you want to use a template or a code generator, you need to install Express globally in your environment. So let's do that. Let me go npm install Express, and let's go and install it globally. I already have it, so I think it won't take too much time because it's already there. Now, I need to install the Express generator. So I can go npm install Express generator and do -G to that too. So it's going to install it globally. If I want to now scaffold an application and get this Express generator to build for me a template of an application that I can take later on and improve upon, I can do that by going Express, let's say Express rocks. So it just scaffolded for me an app. It created a folder with that app inside it. So here is my Express rocks app. So once you've created this scaffolded app, you can go to it and try it out. So I'm going to go and look for this folder, Express rocks. I'll go into that folder and I can pretty much start it. We need to install the dependencies. So to install the dependencies, you go npm install. Without the dependencies, you can't run this application. So now we can run it. npm start. You will notice that it triggers that the main app is at bin www. Anyways, let's open this app and see what's in it. So this is what you get. It looks a little bit trivial, but the important thing is that this scaffolding tool, it did give you a full-blown Express application that you can start with. So let's have a look at what's behind this app. Let me break this. Code. And let's open this up in Visual Studio Code. And here we go. Let's start with the package.json. If you look at the package.json, there's a lot of middleware that they installed here. Body parser, cookie parser, debug, Express, Jade, Morgan, and serve fave icon. The start script points to a file called bin www. If we go to bin, and there is a file here called www, it doesn't seem to have an extension. But this is a JavaScript file. If I click on here, this is a JavaScript file. This is where it's setting the port number, and this is where it's listening to the port number, and so on and so forth. So this is the main app. And all your routing rules and everything is set up here. Let's look at the views. What views have they got? It's using a view engine called Jade. And this is like the default view engine that's used by the scaffolder. If you look at the index page, it starts off by saying that it extends layout. So what is layout? Layout is your template. If you open up layout, this is where your high-level elements are. And if you look at this markup here, block content, this is the injection point that the views inject themselves inside of. So this particular index Jade, it's going to inject itself inside of this block here. And the syntax for this is that, first of all, it extends layout, means it uses that template, and that this is the content that's going to be injected in that place. Here, it's going to display the title using h1 tag, and it's going to display welcome to and the title using the tag. Now, if you want to know where title is coming from, that's coming from, this is where title is being declared. So this index file is calling the index.jade. It renders index.jade. Now, this is a full-blown application that seems to work. Let us see how we can deploy this to Heroku. If you want to deploy something like this to Heroku, it's pretty easy. Because we're going to use Git to push our code to Heroku, we have to make use of the git ignore. Make sure that we don't push into Heroku files that we don't need. The folder that we must avoid at any cost is this node modules folder, because it's got too many files. So the way to do a git ignore is to create a file in this folder, new file, .git ignore. So now with this git ignore file, let us exclude the folders that we don't need. We should definitely exclude node modules. And if there's any npm debug log files, we can also exclude those. We don't have them at the moment. Sometimes there could be like environment files. Another thing that we may want to exclude is if you're working on a Mac. Mac app tends to produce this folder, which is not useful when you deploy. So this is a template of what you may want to exclude. So another thing we should check on is in the package.json, we should have a start page, because otherwise our cloud engine will not know what is the main page. In addition to that, it's a good idea also in the case of Heroku to create a file here called procfile. It's a file name called procfile, no extension. And in this procfile, this is also a way of telling Heroku what is the main app and how do I start it. So you should say web, node, and In our case, to start this app, we should start it using this. So I'll go back to my proc file and say to Node, when you want to start my app, this is the way you start it. Now, let us initialize our Git repo. You do that by going git init. This initializes the repo. The next step is to add files into the local repo. Git add plot. The next step is to commit these files. Go git commit and add a message. So this should commit the files. In order to deploy to Heroku using this method, there are other methods, but I'm going to use the method that uses the Heroku command line interface. And this is an app that you have to install. Once you install that, you will get this command available to you, Heroku. I would need to log into my Heroku account in order to use this utility and to create a website. So I'm going to say Heroku login. It's going to ask me for my credentials. The credentials are an email account and a password. I'm going to enter my email account. My password would be the password that I use when I log into Heroku. So now that I'm logged in, I can tell Heroku to create for me a web app in the cloud. And you do that by going Heroku create. So it created for me a web app in the cloud. Every time you create a web app in the cloud, it tends to give your web app some sort of a name, a host name. In this case, it gave my web app the name Boiling Earth 79180. The next step is to push your code into Heroku using Git. Now, when I did Heroku create, it created for me a Git remote repo. If you want to know the name of that Git remote repo, you can type in Git remote. You can see that the remote repo is called Heroku. It's this one here. So in order to push into that remote repo, I would do this. I would go git push Heroku. That's the remote repo, and locally it's master. And this would push it. After pushing the code to Azure, after pushing the code to Heroku, we can get Heroku to display for us a website. And that's done by going Heroku open. And if everything is good, the website should appear. That's deployed. Now this is continuous integration. It's called continuous integration. And you could say to some extent it is continuous deployment. Whenever you make a change, you add the changes, you commit, you push, and it always takes the latest version the latest version gets pushed. If something went wrong and for whatever reason this page didn't show up as it's supposed to, then what you can do is you can check out the logs. So you can go Heroku logs. And this gives you the log of what went wrong. So you can see here that one of the problems is that there is no fave icon and you got a 404. So you may want to put a fave icon in there because it produces a 404. Now we may manage to push this to Heroku. We're going to now build an Express application from scratch without using a generator. Let's go to a folder that we can work with. So I'm going to create a folder here and I'll call it Express 101. And in here, I'll go into command prompt and I'll do npm init. We have the package.json file. Just accept all the defaults and say yes here. The next thing is, in this app, I want to install Express. So I'm going to go npm install Express and I'll do it locally. And I'll open this application in Visual Studio Code. And in Visual Studio Code, I'll create a new file and I'll call it app.js. Now the code for app.js, I'm going to grab it from some snippets that I have. This is code that we used before. We're using Express and we're starting a server by going app.listen and it starts the server. So if we run this, we'll see that it's working. To start the app, we have to go node app.js. And now it's listening to the port number and that it's doing something. Every time we change the code, we have to restart the server, and that's a little bit silly. Now there is an application called NodeMon. And NodeMon is better for developers because if you run your application using NodeMon, every time something changes, it restarts the application automatically. So let's install NodeMon. NodeMon has to be installed globally. So we're going to go npm -g. So it installs it globally. And I probably already have it, but it will still sort of update it if necessary. Okay, now that we have NodeMon, instead of typing in node app.js, I'm going to type NodeMon app.js. And you will see that every time I make a change, the server starts automatically. For example, here, if I change something here, for example, I put a colon after port, as soon as it saves, you will notice that it restarted the server. And that port that the colon I put after port, it actually appears. So it's good to use NodeMon. From my snippets, what I'm going to do is, okay, I'll start all over again. I'm going to create some middleware. I'm going to create a new file here, and I'm going to call it middleware.js. And I'll take all the code that I have in app.js and put it into middleware.js. In here, I'm going to add some code from my snippets. This is intended to show you how middleware works. We have here a function called log, and it takes as arguments the request, the response, and next. Now, the way the pipeline works in Node is that you add this middleware along the pipeline. It does a piece of work, and then it passes control to the next piece of middleware. You have a middleware called log, for example, and the job of this middleware is to log the date, the method of the request object, and the URL of the request object. It's going to do that job and then pass on control to the next middleware. Now, this is the way we're going to call these various middlewares. If the routing is to the root, it's going to call middleware log, followed by middleware hello, followed by any other middleware that you give it. But it's obvious that hello is the last piece of middleware that's being called. Therefore, when you look at hello, so I'm going to add the snippet for hello. What hello does is it responds with some sort of HTML, and then it ends the output and passes on to the next. But it's obvious that this is the one that ends the output to the user. So now if we run this, let's see what's going to happen. We're going to run this middleware.js. So I'm going to stop this and go nodemon middleware.js. We now go and request this page. It's going to actually display hello world. Now, the reason that the break is not being processed here is because we did not set out the content type to be HTML, but that's fine. But we know now that first, log is being called, because if you go to the command line, here is where log is being called. It's displaying the date, the method, and a URL. So that's being called first. And then the next step is that hello is being called. Now there's an alternative way of calling middleware. One way is to sort of chain all these calls to the middleware. But there's another way. You can do this. You can say, for example, app.use log. So basically you're saying, okay, call log first. And then I can say app.get, when the routing is the root of the website, we can call hello. And the end result is pretty much the same, because my app here is still running. If I go and request this page, it's still going to do the same thing, but we didn't train all these requests for the middleware to be called all on one line, but we're doing it on multiple lines. Now let's get back to our app.js file. Let me close this. And let's go to app.js. I'm going to replace my app.js with another snippet of code. So the next snippet of code is a startup Express app. And this is what it looks like. We're importing the HTTP package, importing the Express package, getting an instance of the Express object, specifying a port number here of 3000. This is just like the previous one. When the root is requested, we're going to spit out some HTML. And then we start the server and have the server listen on app. One other way to avoid this is just go and get the server itself to listen, the app object to listen on the port number. This should work. Let's go here. Now we should actually stop this because it was using the middleware. We have to get it to call app.js instead. So let's see if this works. This one works. Let's enhance this a little bit. We want to use a view engine, and the most common view engine used is called Jade. Let's install Jade locally. So I'm going to get into the command terminal of Visual Studio Code and go and type in here npm install Jade, and let's do that locally. Save. Once it's installed, I can import it in my application and start using it. Okay, so now this has been installed. Let's start using it. I'm gonna close this. We don't need to import it because Jade is really part of Express. But what you should do is set it as the default view engine for this application. And the way to do that is you go app.set and you say my view engine is Jade. Then we're going to comment out this code because we want to use Jade. And when you're using a view engine, you don't send, you actually render. You render a page. Go to a folder called Jade, and then in there you'll find a page called index. I want you to use these parameters to render the page. So I'm going to say, okay, here's a JSON object. Use this as the title property. Now, I don't have a folder called Jade index. The convention is that you must have a folder called view. So I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call it views. And under views, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it Jade. So when I tell it to go to this location Jade index, it knows to go to the views folder because that's the convention. And now in this Jade folder, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it index.jade. In index.jade, I'm going to put the Jade syntax of a page. And I have a snippet for that. What does it say? This says that the DTD is of type doc type, meaning this is an HTML5 page that's going to be produced. The top level element is HTML. Then you have a head tag with it. You have title, and it gets this property from app.js, from here. So it's going to create a title tag, and it will put this title inside of the title tag. Then it's going to create a body tag with h1 surrounding the title, and then this text will be surrounded by a paragraph tag. Having done this, if we start our server, so I can go here and say node-mon app.js. Now that this has started, let's have a look at what our page looks like. You see, this works. We were able to render the Jade page, there is this concept of a layout, and the layout is a template. So typically when you're working with a large project, you don't want to put all your top level elements in the index page. You want to use a layout. So I'll show you how to do that. We're going to create another file in this Jade folder, and I'm going to call it layout.jade. And in this layout file, I'm going to put the top level elements there. In my layout.jade, I'm going to put these top level elements, and these top level elements, basically, it is the DTD, the HTML tag, the head tag, the body tag, and this, what it means is that this is an injection point for the views. The views will inject themselves inside of here. This means that we have to modify the index.jade page. So in index.jade, you don't need to add top level elements. You just need to add your content. You can see here that it starts off by saying extends layout, which means it uses the template. And then it's going to inject itself, it's going to inject this code into the injection point in the layout. What I want to display now is this is Express that extends layout. And let me make this uppercase so that it stands out. So we know that it's getting its content from here. So now if I refresh, you see, here's my uppercase. I'm using the layout. Now, this is how Jade works. Let's see how EJS works. And EJS is another view engine. So in order to use EJS, we need to install the package. So let me stop this and go npm install EJS save. Now there's another package that you need to install with EJS if you want to use templates, and that is EJS locals. That's another package. We need both of these. Now let's replace our view engine in here with EJS rather than Jade. So I'm going to comment this out, and we're going to use EJS. We have to say var EJS engine, for example, equals to require EJS locals. And then I'm going to set my view engine to use the engine, the EJS engine. So I'll do that by going app.engine EJS, comma, EJS engine. And this is where I set my default view engine. Set view engine, comma, EJS. Now, because I'm using EJS, I'm going to create another folder under views here, and I'll put all my EJS pages there. So I'll create a new folder under here. Let me just call it EJS at the same level as Jade. And in this folder, I'll create a new file called index.ejs. Now EJS is a little bit preferable for those people who want to work within the HTML syntax for a view engine, because the syntax used by Jade is not really HTML-like. If you want something more HTML-like, then you're better off using EJS. So now let me get you the code for the index.ejs view. So this is very much HTML-like. In fact, it is HTML. The only difference is that these are scripts that link to EJS. So this is the way you script the fact that you want to display the title. And these two are the same. Go back to our app.js, and I need to comment this out. I'll copy it and comment this out. And this I will replace with pretty much the same code, but rather than going to Jade index, I'm going to go to EJS index. And instead of saying Express and Jade, I put here Jane, should have been Jade. I'm going to say EJS. So now let's run this and see what happens. It's now running, listening on port 3000. So if I refresh this, you see it's running my new view engine, which is the EJS view engine. Now, as we did with Jade, we may want to use layouts. So I'm going to come here and use an EJS layout. So I'll create a new file. I'm going to call it layout.ejs. And in this layout.ejs, so I'm going to copy the code from my index EJS and put it in layout.ejs. And I'm going to replace this with an injection point that to be the body. That's the injection point. Back in my index.ejs, all I need to do is I'm going to replace that this view uses the layout file specified by layout.ejs. So I have to say layout.ejs. And here I can add some content. I can say, for example, h1, and maybe put the title. Then I can put some other content here. Okay, let's see if this works. So now we're using a layout instead of just everything in the straight page. And sure enough, it's coming from the layout. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you watch more in the future.